I want to talk to you today about the 5 principles of pastoral self-care. Pastors are caregivers. We care for those that God has called us to, our church. We're there to serve. But one of the things that we struggle with is self-care. The number one principle of self-care that I like to talk about often is spiritual self-care. Now, I know that might sound funny, might seem strange, but we sometimes struggle with spiritual self-care. Let me explain. Pastors are great at reading Scripture in order to form a sermon. We're great at reading Scripture through the lens of someone else or trying to help someone else that might be in need or might need a word. But I want to encourage you today to have that principle, that spiritual principle, to be able to read Scripture for yourself. You never know when God might have a word for you or when there might be something that God's speaking to you. Not only that, but our prayer life. Oftentimes when we're praying for other people. We're praying for the church. We're praying for the needy. I want us to get into the habit as well of praying for ourselves. So that's number one, spiritual self-care. Number two, one thing that I think that the Church of God has done a better job of here recently is understanding the need for rest and sabbatical. That brings me to physical self-care. We all need time out. We all need a day to relax, and we all need a day to rest. Another thing that we've been putting a lot more emphasis on is sabbaticals. And I hope that you are able to do that in your practice as well, because it's difficult to do what we do at the pace that we often try to go at whenever we're in the grind, as I like to call it, of ministry. So make sure that you take time out for yourself. Enjoy, learn how to rest, learn how to relax. There's plenty of examples in Scripture where Jesus was able to do that himself. One of the things that we often forget about is number 3, however, and that's emotional self-care. The Center for Disease Control once made the statement that we are made up 80% emotionally and 20% physically. So we're doing ourselves a disservice whenever we take time off and we make sure that we schedule that, or we go on a sabbatical and we don't do anything about that hurt that we might have residing within us. If you're in ministry long enough, chances are you've dealt with hurt, disappointment. Those kind of things come kind of with the calling that we have. So I want to encourage you, don't only just take time off, but find someone that you can talk to, someone you can confide in and open up to about your past hurt, your pain, things that you struggled with. It might even include a counselor. Don't overlook the importance to emotional self-care. Because if we sweep that under the rug, it doesn't go away on its own. It stays there. It resonates in us. And if we're not careful, that will eventually turn into toxicity. And none of us want that in our leadership. Number 4, another self-care principle that I often like to discuss is relational. God made us to be relational beings. He wants to be in relationship with His creation. We also need to have people in our lives that we can call upon. A lot of times that's a marriage. Obviously, we need to be relational in our marriage with our spouse, our kids, friends, someone outside of even your own denomination, outside of the Church of God, that you can talk to and confide in. We need to have those relationships in our lives in order for us to be healthy. God didn't make us to live in an island unto ourselves. So I want to encourage you to find someone in your life that you can open up to and allow yourself to have relational self-care. And then finally, certainly not the least of these, but important as well, is intelligent self-care. I want to encourage you to read. Most pastors that I know have a library that is stacked. So big, as a matter of fact, they don't know what to do with most of their books. I want to encourage you to continue to read. It's important for us to be able to sharpen our brain, if you will. You see, a book is like a whetstone to a sword whenever we're talking about intelligent self-care. We need to be people of learning and people that continuously read, whether it be leadership books. There's some wonderful books on theology. Obviously, that's something we want to take a high priority on as well. But be sure to read and find time to be able to read in order to have intelligent self-care. Self-care is not selfish. Self-care is not just for you. Self-care is for you, but it's also for the people around you. It's like when I talked about emotional self-care. Your emotions, they go with you everywhere you go. So your emotion is going to bleed over to everyone else around you. If it's anger, if it's hurt, if it's whatever the case may be, it's going to be important for us to be able to attend to those. So understand that self-care isn't just for you. It's for your spouse. It's for your children. It's for your church. It's for your calling and what God has called for you in your life. So I hope that you take this as a priority and understand that taking care of you is not a waste of time after all.